All right, here we go. So your Bellward question said, describe what you think the relationship between the British, French, and Spanish was like in the mid 1700s. So we're talking like after they're all here, they've set up their colonies. How do we think they're getting along?
Not well.
Okay, not so well, Josh. Why?
Them basically wanting to take over all of the New World, and you know they can't do that because the French and the Spanish have their land.
Okay.
Well, everybody wants to
rule the world.
Yeah,
okay, everybody wants to rule the world. They're all competing to be rulers of the world. Lauren.
Going back onto like non-global free thing. I remember you said that they set Georgia for like people who owed money, and then like also a barrier for Spanish Florida, so the Spanish would attack Georgia. So probably guessing not so well.
Great. Yes. So we know that the whole reason Georgia was set up was so it could be a buffer between Spanish Florida and the rest of the colonies, right? So why would you need a buffer if you weren't worried about the Spanish? Don't judge my water bottle. It is my water bottle. I don't have to read it. Okay. Anything else you guys want to add? Yeah, I mean, yeah. So today, if you didn't, know yet, we're talking about the French and Indian War. So maybe that was a big hint that these countries are not getting along with each other. And this war, the French and Indian War, is a war between the British and French and the British and the Native Americans. Okay, I know. And the name of it is the French and Indian War. The French and the Native Americans are not fighting each other in this war. We're going to talk about it. Okay. I know it's confusing. It's confusing. But the French and the Native Americans are not fighting each other in this war. Okay. You're like, this is the dumbest name for a war I've ever heard. Yeah. So before we move into our notes, I just want to go over some quick dates for you. Your Module 5 test. We're on Silver Day, right? December 17th for you. That's a Thursday, right? So we have usually your units take about 3 to 4 weeks, and that's where we are. Okay, so we have about a month. Also 4 weeks until winter break. You can do it. We can make it. Okay, we can do it. And then your next history fair due date is works cited draft number 2, which you'll have feedback by the end of the week. That's due next Friday, but we'll go over that at the end of class. Okay, just wanted to put some things on your radar for you. So go ahead and go to your French and Indian War notes for me. What's up, Bearcat? What class period is this? Yes, so if you go into the feedback section in Canvas, you'll be able to see that score there, but that's before I've added any, if you did the study guide. Does that make sense? Okay, but if you know you didn't do the study guide, then that's your grade. That's in there. Okay. So like I said, the French and Indian War, the French and the natives were not fighting each other. Hey, y'all focus. Eventually, the Native Americans helped the French. This war, it had another name as well. The name at the top of your notes. What was the name there? The 7 Years War. I should put it on there. I'll make sure he has that. But the 7 Years War is another name for this war. This war was being fought in 2 places at one time. So you had the 7 Years War happening in Europe, and then across the Atlantic Ocean in the Americas, the French and the British were also fighting each other. Okay. And it was named the 7 Years War because guess why?
It was 7 years.
It lasted for 7 years because they're so creative. Okay.
I know, right?
Everybody with me? Okay. So we're going to look at the reasons why this war was fought and significant events of the war. And we're going to see how this war impacted the relationship between the British and the American colonists. Okay, everybody with me? What I want you to keep in mind is that up until this point, everything that we've talked about, all of our colonies, all of those things, those were all created and they had been there for like 100 years, 150 years, some of them. Okay. And your colonists, they had been enjoying self-government, meaning they came over, they settled in the colonies and pretty much did whatever they wanted. Now in the 1750s-ish, all of a sudden the British officials are saying, oh no, you're not allowed to do what you want anymore. You now have to listen to us. How's that going to go over with them?
Not well.
Yeah, not well. So if you for a long time have been doing whatever you wanted and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and said, you can't do that anymore,
I'd be pretty upset.
you're going to be mad. And that's what happened with the colonists. They had been enjoying the freedom of self-government. And now the British are saying, oh, sorry, you have to follow our rules.
Were there any criminals? That you know,
I don't understand, like,
well, like during the self-government, were there people that?
oh yeah, for sure. Like, and like your colonists, they all set up their like own rules in their own communities to deal with people who broke the law. Right? Remember we talked about the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut and the House of Burgesses, right?
Like there were still laws, but people could still do.
When I say like self-government, I'm talking about like they made their own rules when they got to the New World, when they got to their colonies, and they weren't following the laws that Great Britain had. And a lot of times they weren't laws that were very much different. But if they wanted to like raise or lower taxes, they wanted to do this or that, like they didn't have the British government going, you can't do that. But now they did. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So like you weren't allowed to murder people. Like that was still a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Or like steal.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this map shows us where North America stands in 1750. All right, so everything in that green color, that is what Spain is in charge of, right? That's where Spain has colonized, that's what they control. Everything in that red color is what France controls. Okay, and then everything in yellow is what the British control. And then like, yeah, Josh mentioned like the Russian holdings up here. They're kind of, in a nice way, they're like irrelevant to this story.
Wait, there were
Okay.
There were people in America that were like, kill. Do they have like that accent yet?
I don't know.
Oh, dang it, that would've been
So,
great.
but as far as like this area goes with Russian American holdings, they're not relevant to our story of the French and Indian War. Okay. What I really want you to focus on are these three colors, the yellow, the red, and the green. Looking at this map, you have some disputed land. You see our little stripy area, right? So we have a couple of them. That land is being disputed by the British and the French. They both think that land belongs to them. And so essentially the French and Indian War starts because of that area. And really we're talking this area right here, the Ohio Valley area. That is where the French and Indian War essentially starts. Okay. So just keep those things in mind. Also keep in mind that the British and the French are fighting over land because they both say it belongs to them. But who does it really belong to?
No, the British. I don't know. Oh, Spain.
Who was there before even the French and the British? The Native Americans, right? The Native Americans were there. So essentially, the British and the French are fighting over land that never really belonged to them in the first place. Okay, so that's where we are. Just keep that in mind. It's a great reason to fight, right?
I know, right?
Thank you, Cohen. All right. So the reason we're fighting, again, is both the British and the French believed that the land in the Ohio Valley belonged to them. It was a good area for trade. A lot of people wanted to be in that area. The French had already established that trading relationship with the Native Americans, going all the way back to Module 2, right? And in Module 2, we know that the French came in, they were friendly to the natives, and then tried to convert them. If they didn't convert, what happened? The French.
Oh, they would be like, that's okay.
Yeah, they were nice to them, right? They're like, that's fine. We'll just still trade with each other. The Spanish, on the other hand, it was convert or die, right? So the French were in that area already. They were trading with the Native Americans already. And the British saw that and they wanted the same thing. So here come the British. They're like, this is our land. What are you talking about? We stuck our flag in the ground. It's obviously our land, right? And so for protection, because the French kind of foresee a British, like, I say this, I always think of the Beatles, but like a British invasion, right? You guys probably have no idea what I'm talking about when I say that, maybe. But they think the British are going to come, they're going to attack, they're going to take the land. And so what the French start to do is build several forts to protect like vital areas that they use for trading with the Native Americans. Their biggest fort was Fort Duquesne. Duquesne, right? Duquesne. That is not Duquesne. It looks like Duquesne, right? It's a French word. I don't know what it means, but you pronounce it Fort Duquesne. So the British try to build some forts in those areas, but the French kind of beat them to it to protect kind of the areas they already hold. But the big one for the French was Fort Duquesne. Everybody with me? The big one for the British was called Fort Necessity.
Why is it Duquesne in there, but it's Duquesne?
Because
Pronounced Duquesne.
because that's a French word. It's a French word.
Yeah, but it's
I don't know French, and that's what it is. Is that what you said, Madison? Because that's what it is. Okay. Our first clash of what would eventually be the French and Indian War happened in 1754. And it happened in that Ohio Valley, in that little stripy area from our map, in that disputed area. The British go in, they take troops in, led by a young officer by the name of George Washington. Oh, have y'all heard of him before? Oh, no, right?
I've never heard of them.
So George Washington, at this point, he was 21 years old. Y'all listen. He was 21 years old, and he was leading these troops to go control this area, to take control of the area. What he doesn't do, and he actually learns from this, what he doesn't do is really look at the whole picture. Okay. You've heard of peripheral vision before?
Yep.
Okay. So that's the things like when you're looking straight on, it's the things that are like, and you can still see, but like they're in your side vision. What George Washington doesn't do is really look at the whole picture. He doesn't even consider his peripheral vision. He doesn't take into consideration what his actions for one thing will do for this battle. Okay. All George Washington sees is an opportunity for what he believes will be a surprise attack on the French and the Native Americans around Fort Duquesne. And he's like, well, I have to take advantage of that. The problem is that he loses. All right. Again, he's very young. He's an experienced soldier, but not necessarily an experienced leader. And so he learns a lot from this situation. he essentially takes his men into like a slaughterhouse. Like he takes his men into a battle where there's no way they can win. Like it takes them into a place where a lot of his men end up dying. And it's because of his decision. What was I saying? Oh, he learns a lot from this battle though. Like he learns that he has to take into consideration the lives of his men. He has to look at the whole situation. What ends up happening is he and his men like get trapped in this battle. And the Native Americans really kind of come to the rescue of the French in this, or I say rescue, they back up the French in this battle, and Washington and his men get closed in from both sides. So they're like stuck in the middle of the French and the Native Americans. And the only way to like get out of it is completely surrender. So that's what ends up happening. George Washington really takes that hard. He takes full responsibility for that eventually, not at first, but eventually he does. And he learns a lot about being a leader from that incident. And so what he takes from that, eventually he brings into being the general for the Continental Army in the American Revolution, right? Did you guys know he was a British soldier before he led the Americans in the Revolution? Yeah, maybe. Like maybe you'd heard that before. So that's a myth. The question was, did he have wooden teeth?
No, wasn't it like made from ghosts?
He had, no. I'll tell y'all. He actually, so he didn't have teeth. Well, he did have teeth, and then he didn't have them. Yeah, all of his teeth fell out at a pretty young age, probably like 16, 17-ish. Maybe even younger than that. The men in George Washington's family had some kind of hereditary disease where their teeth rotted out. And so he had like what we would consider dentures today. And his teeth were made out of a bunch of different things. Like there were human teeth, there were cow teeth, there were wooden teeth, right? Not really. Like they didn't bathe every day. They didn't brush their teeth like we do. Which like hygiene like that. So it was like a cultural thing too. Like like deodorant wasn't a thing either. So everyone was probably real stinky and had real bad teeth. Essentially, that's just how it went. I'm not quite sure when the shift happened to like, hey, you should probably bathe daily and wear deodorant and brush your teeth. But dental hygiene is linked to good heart health too, just so you know. Yes. So brushing your teeth can help you have a healthy heart. Healthy mouth, healthy heart. Yeah. I brush my teeth sometimes 3 times a day. Like it just kind of depends on the day. Yeah. But that's a thing. So anyway, his teeth fell out. He had like this mouthpiece that was like it was like metal, right? And all the teeth were like in there. They were like metal dentures, and it was super uncomfortable to him. He didn't really like wearing it. And so if he didn't have to wear it, he didn't. If there was like a party or something that he was going to, he would wear his teeth, but he like wouldn't talk a lot because they're uncomfortable. He didn't want to show like his teeth, and he couldn't really talk very well in like his mouthpiece. And yeah, I don't know. His favorite food actually too was fish with butter and honey.
No, I knew like that, but like the honey part.
Yeah.
I
Like syrup. Like not just like, oh, a little bit of like a honey glazed salmon. I don't know if that's a thing.
It is.
Right? Okay. Not like that. It's like fish smothered in butter, covered in honey.
Like So you just dump honey on it. Like,
You butter the pan, of course. You butter the
Yeah,
pan.
but it was easy for him to eat because the fish was soft, and so he would eat that
dude,
like without his
crunchy,
teeth.
Like little crunchy things you get with fish. I like happy meals.
Yeah.
You
So, yeah. Just so you know, a little history of George Washington.
Yeah, I
If-
don't like George Washington.
yeah. If we, why?
I don't know.
Because you didn't like he ate fish with butter and honey.
His hygiene.
Oh, well, no, that was everyone. It wasn't just him.
Okay, well,
And his
never
teeth
mind.
didn't fall out because he didn't brush his teeth. That was gonna happen
Yeah,
anyway.
never mind, never mind.
Okay. Okay. If the Washington DC trip happens, who knows? The George Washington's teeth are at Mount Vernon, so you can like see them. But when we get to that module where we talk more about him as president, I'll show you a picture of his teeth because it's not, we don't have time. We'll talk about it then. We talk about him more then. He's just a little part of the French and Indian War. We'll get there. You can Google it.
I'm doing that right now.
Okay. I mean, they're not pretty. They're not very nice teeth. So it'll teach you to brush your teeth. Everybody brush your teeth. Have Bearcat Falcon. Okay, here we go.
Hey, yo.
I'll just give you a second to look it up.
Hey, yo.
Most people's teeth looked like that though.
Hey,
They did
yo.
not have good teeth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Come on.
This war, what it eventually does is it leads to like a really bad relationship between the colonists and the British. The British start this war because they want what? The British start this war because they want what? Land. Okay. The British started. The colonists, they already have their land that they live on, right? They're like, we have our land. We're good. They did not like the fact that the British were like starting to cause trouble where they lived. And so you have what we call British American tensions happening. It's like if you've ever been in a room where you know with two other people that you know those two people don't like each other. And you're like sitting in this awkward like space where you're like, okay, these people really don't like each other and everybody knows it. And like, you just feel really uncomfortable.
It's all fun and games until they start fighting.
Yeah. So the colonists and the British pretty much from the 1750s until the end of the revolution in the 1780s hate each other. Okay. And this is kind of where it starts. The British come in and say, we're fighting this war for you. And the colonists say, we didn't ask you to fight a war. Okay. Everybody with me? Yes. Okay. There were also very different views on the different aspects of war, like how to fight, how to pay for it, organization of people, all of those things. Okay. So your methods of fighting were very different. Your colonists, Kayla, if you can't see and you would like to move up to the seat up here, you can. Okay. Your colonists, their style of fighting, and I put this in parentheses because we don't use this word, but this is the term that they use. Their Indian style or Native American style fighting. We call this guerrilla warfare or guerrilla tactics. Who plays video games? Okay. I saw a commercial today that there's a new like Call of Duty game coming out this weekend. Okay. And I was like, oh, cool. Good for Call of Duty. Okay.
I love Call of Duty.
When you play those types of video games,
Why are we starting to fight about games?
it's my fault. When you play games like that, Josh, when you play games like that, you are using guerrilla tactics. Do you in those games stand out in the open for everyone who's playing to see you? No, right? You hide behind, if you do, like, yeah.
I mean, if it were Juggernaut,
Good luck.
then yeah.
You don't stand out for the whole like video game universe to see you, right? You hide behind things, you're like sniping people, right? That's guerrilla warfare.
Or you fight 2v2 for your life and you
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. You have to be aggressive in the gulag.
Okay.
You have to. It depends on your life.
Yeah. Your guerrilla warfare is more like modern warfare today. Owen. I don't know. It's not gorilla. It's guerrilla. It's not gorilla. Not like the animal. But that's not how it's spelled. So it's not the same word. Yeah. Guerilla. It is not gorilla. It is not like the animal. It is not like Harambe RIP. Gorilla. With a G. It sounds like the animal, but it's not. The British, they used a different style of fighting where they would literally stand in straight lines out in the open and fire. That was like the main style of fighting. Like that was the main tactic, is like you would meet at a place, everyone would stand in straight lines, and they'd fire back and forth at each other. No.
Your turn. Thank you.
Right? So, and also with guerrilla warfare, there's like camouflage, right? With your with marching in formation and fighting in formation, we know the British at this point, their uniforms were what color? Bright red.
So hide the blood.
So there's no hiding. The British cannot hide. Well, the French used that as well. Okay. Now the Native Americans used guerrilla warfare tactics, right? But we'll get there. But the marching in formation and standing in lines and shooting at each other was very normal. Like they did that in the Civil War. Yeah, like very normal. Okay. It is not like modern warfare at all. Okay. No. No, we are definitely in modern warfare, more guerrilla style, and now even more modern of like you can send in unmanned planes
I can
somewhere
take
if you
one
want
strike
to,
on the person,
right?
they have to run away.
Okay.
I don't know why they
Your
have
military organization, your colonists were organized into what we call militias. MILITIAS. No, yeah, militias. All right. So militias were like your own army for your own neighborhood.
friendly neighborhood police force.
Yes. Okay. MILITIAS. One more time. Okay. Yeah. Your British military was very organized. Your British officers were in charge of your enlisted men. Like it was your job if you were in the military. Okay. Militias were completely voluntary. Everybody with me? So you did not have to be in the militia. You didn't have to be in the army either, but if you joined the army, that was your job. Josh.
Was the fighting when they were doing worse? One team would shoot first, and then they were when they were done, they were like your turn, and then the others.
Yes and no. Like, so like it wasn't like they were yelling across the field going, your turn, right? But like someone would start, the next side would go, the next side would go. But it was because you had one shot each time. But you had one shot each time, right? It was front loaded, muzzle loading. Yes. Like you had one shot each time. You had to reload after your shot each time. Okay. No automatic weapons, no like chambers to hold bullets, none of that.
Magazine.
Yes. Guns also didn't have what we call rifling today. I don't know much about guns, but I know this much. Rifling is like the track on the inside of the barrel that the bullet follows.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Today we have that, so guns shoot super accurate today. Then they didn't have that. So if you didn't load the gun the best way, your bullet might bounce all the way down the barrel, obviously very quickly. But like, say you're aiming straight across the field from where you are, your bullet might go this way, or it might go this way, right? So like, it's probably not going to hit where you shoot.
Be like this.
It's not going to go behind you. No, it's not going to curve like that.
No,
Okay, military discipline for your colonists. They didn't follow any kind of military rules or protocols. Zero. No military protocols. Because they're technically not the military. They're just the militia. Remember, they're volunteers. They don't really have training. If you don't show up, who cares?
I voluntarily sacrificed my life for Pakistan.
Okay. The British, they practiced daily. They had shooting drills. Your soldiers were very, very disciplined. If you don't show up when you're supposed to, you can get in trouble. And that's still like today, if you're in the military, it's your job and you don't show up, you're known as AWOL, absent without leave. And you can get kicked out of the military. You can be put in like military jail. I say there's another name for it, like besides that, or like military probation kind of thing. Like you can get in trouble for bad behavior in the military, or just like completely kicked out.
So basically,
You want like honorable people in the military. Your militias, they're like, don't care. The war itself, remember the colonists were like, the British said, we're here to help you fight this war. And the colonists said, we don't want war. Like, we didn't ask for protection, right? And so when it came time to like pay for the war, the colonists were like, we're not paying for this war because we didn't ask for it. We didn't ask for your help that you say we needed.
quote unquote, help.
Right. The British said, well, if you're going to be protected by us, you're going to pay us.
Ooh.
Again, the colonists are like, we didn't ask for your help. Right. Yeah. All right. So your attitudes of your colonists, Josh, your attitudes of your colonists versus your attitudes of the British. Your colonists, very casual, super rugged. They're more like live in the wild kind of people, if we're going to talk about live in the wild kind of people. Your British, super divas. Okay. Have you ever heard of glamping?
Yes, my mom. did that.
Okay.
We did that.
So camping
But with like
versus glamping, right?
Sure.
So I watched this show one time where people are like, we're going to stay in tents. It's like, oh, well, we're going to go camping in an RV with air
Oh my
conditioning.
God, Courtney,
my mom did that.
Okay.
When we lived in
I'm
Boston, we went
going to be honest. I'm probably more of a glamper
My mom had a shirt with a
than a camper. Although I have been camping.
It's fun. Except when you go to Yellowstone National Park.
Cassidy. Taxes and help.
Oh my God, Courtney, no, I do not want
But your British, they were super divas. They needed like all the amenities. Okay. They needed like the best things, all like the super nice comforts of like regular life. Okay. So much so that your British officers usually had servants with them,
Oh my god.
and they always brought their tea settings with them. They had to have their tea.
during war. Oh my God,
Correct.
I have my daily tea.
Yes. And I'll tell you that that's a very real, like my grandmother was from Great Britain. Maybe Isaiah can They love their tea. Yeah, my grandmother had her tea at the same time every day.
I heard that.
It was tea time, then it was nap time.
I heard that the
That was my
tea
nana.
is actually in second place, and first is China. And
Maybe, yeah, possibly.
And Britain is literally like twice as small as
Yeah. So like culturally though, like tea must be had. Yeah, like they have to have their tea.
If you haven't had tea.
yeah,
on
I
a
don't know.
daily
I don't
basis.
like tea, so
Tea, regular disgusting.
I don't
tea,
it
and then
tastes
sweet
like
tea.
watered down.
Yeah, like sweet tea's better. Like I
No. I just don't like tea. Like I don't drink tea. My dad drank like unsweet tea
My great grandma.
with a lot of lemon.
My great grandma, she was like half, especially love it. So it's like,
Yeah. No, like but yeah, tea is very much a thing, so much that your British officers had to have their tea settings with them all the time. This war eventually leads to the first political cartoon in the colonies. Have we seen this picture before?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a very famous political cartoon. Most people use it in context with the American Revolution, but it's actually from the French and Indian War period. Yes, so this is a snake, and it's labeled with all the different colonies, except New England. New England, they're all kind of like bunched together. Okay. So New England, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, right? Those four. So Benjamin Franklin actually creates this political cartoon, right? These tensions, these feelings of hatred between the British and the colonists, Benjamin Franklin recognizes that if the colonists do not work with the British, then the French might win. And if the French win, then that might not be good for the colonies. They might not be British colonies anymore. Everybody with me? So what he says is he wanted an intercolonial association, meaning he wanted all the colonies to be connected in some way to help the British defeat the French. Because if we don't, we might not be able to be colonies anymore the way that we have enjoyed it. And the reason it's cut up is it's based on a myth that a snake will come back to life if its parts are placed near each other. Okay. So that's the idea there with it, but it was really a push for the colonists to unite and not like literally die, but figuratively die in the sense of we're not going to be colonies in the way that we have enjoyed our self-government for 100, 150 years. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So Benjamin Franklin was saying, you might not like the war, but it's in our best interest to support the British against the French. Does that make sense to everybody? You with me? Okay. So in 1756, war is officially declared. And again, the British are fighting whom? Native Americans and what's the name of the war? The French, right? So the British at first are just fighting the French and also kind of fighting like diplomatically with the colonists because they want to fight the war, the colonists don't. And so they're trying to figure out a way to make everyone happy. So the Native American tribes were very friendly with the French and did not make an alliance with the British. But they also pledged not to help the French in the war. They actually promised that they would stay neutral during this whole war. They did not stay neutral. They did break their promise, and eventually they obviously help which side? Which side were they friendly with? The French. They helped the French because they figured if the French win, then they can continue their good trading relationship. Everybody with me? Okay. This is bad news for the British because near the beginning of the war, they don't really do very well. And getting help from the Native Americans would have been nice. The French also eventually get help from the Spanish, which we'll get to in just a second.
Hey, yo.
Right. So the British are just kind of like, everybody hates us, which
And
like,
they still win. But we're
right.
gonna talk about how they still win.
we will talk about. They do win. Spoiler alert, they do. Yeah. So was everybody okay here? Yes. Okay. In 1757, the British realized that they need to do something to at least get the colonists to help them, because if everybody hates them, then they're definitely bound for defeat. Okay. So in 1757, a man named William Pitt becomes becomes foreign minister. And like basically his job is to make sure that other countries don't hate Great Britain too much, right? That they at least can work together even if they don't like the British. But he also has to kind of smooth things over with the colonists. Remember, the colonists don't want this war, so are they really helping the British? No. All right. But William Pitt's like, hey, let's talk about this. I want to listen to you, right? So he told the colonists and he told their leaders, we understand your concerns. I totally understand your concerns about the cost of the war and the reason we're fighting the war, but let's make a deal. All right, let's come to a compromise. So he offers a compromise. What does that mean? A compromise? Yeah, so basically it's an agreement that will help make both sides happy. And the compromise was this. He said to the colonists, if you stay loyal and you cooperate and help us fight, then you won't have to pay for the war. That sounds like a pretty good deal, right? What did I tell you Economics 101 was? Yeah, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So nothing is free. But what he tells the colonists is, oh no, you help us fight, we'll just pay for the war. We just need your help. You won't have to pay for the war. Like he's coughing under his breath going, right now. Okay? He's taking his fingers and crossing them and putting behind his back saying, you don't have to pay for the war. Psych, they're going to have to pay for the war. Right? But he makes them think like they're going to like not have to pay a dime. Yes. Because the colonists essentially believe him. And so by 1758, by the next year, colonial morale, what is morale? Have we heard the word before? We maybe just are not quite sure what it means. So basically like their happiness, like how happy they are. The colonists are way more happy once they think they don't have to pay for the war. All William Pitt does is he like pushes the time when they have to pay, like just back some. He's just like, we'll just sweep this under the rug for now and come back to it later. And the colonists are like, oh, it's gone. We don't have to pay for the war. All right, good here. This is going to cause problems later. Lots and lots of problems later. This is probably like the beginning of the end for the British. You guys know a little bit about the Revolution, a little bit about taxes. The taxes that eventually get put on the colonists come from the French and Indian War. So the colonists are like, oh, forget it, we don't have to pay. This is where they're like, oh, this is free, just pay $100 in shipping and handling, right? That's essentially what William Pitt tells them. You've seen those things on TV? Right. Get two for the price of one. Correct. Yeah. Not really how it works. These are some key victories for the British. Pretty much after the colonists say, yes, we'll help you, the British really never lose another battle, another major one. So a big turning point for the British comes at Quebec. And on our map, oh, there's a lot going on there. That's okay. It's okay. I can't even find.
Beck's right there.
Oh, there we go. Oh, no, you're good. So Quebec is up here. The Battle of Quebec, it is kind of small. The British win this one. This was a really hard fought one, but pretty much from that point forward, the British, there's not really an opportunity for the French to win. Montreal is the last battle, and this is when the French realize that there's no turning the war around. They're spending way too much money, way too much effort on a war they're not going to win. So after that battle is when the French decide to basically give up. So after that battle, this results in the writing of the Treaty of Paris. In our history, in American history, there are two treaties of Paris. The first one ends the French and Indian War. The second one ends the Revolutionary War. Okay, so you really have to pay attention to the dates because you have to know the first Treaty of Paris was in 1763, and that's what this one is. Yes. So they're not going to be in the same module. So this is the only Treaty of Paris that you need to know about for module 5. Okay. In 1761, in 1761, the Spanish decide that they want to get in on this war. All right. They're thinking, and this is before the Battle of Quebec, I believe, but they're thinking like, if the French win, we can get some land, you know, we can like totally kick the British out of North America. Right. And so the Spanish were looking at this as an opportunity, an economic opportunity to make more money, and also an opportunity to gain more land. All right. The problem is, by the time really they get into the war, there's not really, France doesn't have a chance. They're not going to win. Yeah. But whoever negotiated for the Spanish in the Treaty of Paris did a really great job, because the Spanish, even though they're on the losing side, actually gain things. We'll talk about that actually now. So our 3 areas, you have a biggest winner, a biggest loser, and then Spain's kind of like in the middle. The British win. So the French lose. And so they're the biggest loser. So here's what the French lose in negotiating the terms of the Treaty of Paris. So they lose all of their land in Canada. Yes, sir.
I know this is off topic, but where can I find the PowerPoint?
In Canvas, in module 5.
Module five,
Uh-huh.
in module-
Yeah. So your internet's back up?
Yes.
Okay.
I had to restart.
Okay. They lost all of their land in Canada. They lost most of their land in India. So this war, remember I told you, was being fought in Europe and in the Americas. So it actually had global impacts as well. It didn't only affect land in North America, it impacted how these countries traded globally with each other. And they lost all of their land east of the Mississippi River. So basically from the Mississippi River to the Atlantic Ocean, that big red portion of that map from the beginning, they lose all that. And I'm going to show you a before and after map in just a second that you're going to be like, so you'll visually be able to see what we're talking about here. Spain, they get all of the French land west of the Mississippi River. And they also gain New Orleans. So they lose, but they win at the same time. Okay. So they gain those things, but they also lose Florida to Great Britain. Great Britain was like, well, yeah, you can have those things if we can have Florida. Why would Florida be important to the British? Think about our colonies. Go ahead, Isaiah. Yeah, so Isaiah said Georgia was created to protect the rest of the colonies from Spanish Florida. Now, if the Spanish don't control Florida, then Georgia doesn't have to be as much of a buffer anymore, right? Everybody with me? Okay. And then the last one, our biggest winners, obviously the British. They get all of the land that the French had in Canada. They control the slave trade in the Caribbean. If you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean movies, right? You know how there's a lot of like British ships in the British Navy. That happens during this time period. Like that's set in the time period where the British control the Caribbean. If you're like, why are the British there? That's why. And they basically control trade in India. And that land from the very beginning, the stripy area, the British claim that land as well. So the British really gain a lot of land, a lot of area during this war. So now here is our before and after picture. Everybody ready? Okay, here's our before and after. Mhm. So this is our map from the beginning of class, right? This is after the French and Indian War is over. Yeah. So the French do hold on to a couple of things. I see him pointing to it. So there's actually one up here. The French are allowed to fish up here in this area. I think that would be considered like Newfoundland area.
Over the Russian areas.
That's why I told you they're like in a nice way irrelevant to this story. Yeah.
No
In a nice way, they're just irrelevant to this story. They're not irrelevant. Yeah. And then down here, Asher pointed out for us, down here, the French held on to this little bitty part of this island. They called it Saint Domingue. Today, we call it Haiti. Okay, but we'll talk more about that later. So today, like geographically, this is Haiti and the Dominican Republic kind of split that island. All right, everybody with me? Good. So poor French, right? I say poor French, don't count the French out. They'll be back. Okay, everybody good? This is our before and after the Treaty of Paris. So, and those notes are in Canvas if you want to look. Questions here? Yeah, the visual better than the words? Yeah. And these maps are in your notes for you too, so you'll need to refer to those for one of your assignments. Effects of the war on the British. One, it increased their control in America, obviously, right? There was a lot more yellow. So that's a positive. A negative, they now have a lot more debt. What's debt? Money that you owe. Miss Gibbons is in a lot of debt now because she just bought a house. So there's that. I went from just debt on my car to a lot more. And then the third thing, also a negative, is the relationship that the British had with the colonists would only get worse and worse and worse over how much the war cost. Yes. Can you, like, we have like literally 2 more slides. Can you wait? Okay. Therefore, because of this like worsening relationship, the British knew that they kind of had to like take a step back, look at what's going on and figure out a way, 1, to pay off their debt, and 2, like not make the colonists too mad. How are they going to pay off their debt? Taxes. How are the colonists going to feel about that when they've been self-governing for 100 years? Very mad. The taxes don't help. Okay. The effects of the war on the colonists, a positive, it unites them against the British. They have a common enemy together. Yay, we all hate the British. Okay. 2, it created a bond amongst the colonists who did fight in the war, like a camaraderie amongst those people that did fight, feeling like they, they felt almost that the British were kind of not worried about them. Like they helped the British win, and then they felt like the British were treating them like dirt, essentially, mistreating them. And then the last thing, these feelings with the British, again, like I said before, would only get worse and worse and worse. The British soldiers didn't help themselves because they weren't very nice to the colonists. Okay, and we'll talk about that more in this module. Our last slide here. The colonists were not happy about the war in general. The British realized that they have a lot of debt now that they need to pay off. And they realize the only way they're going to be able to pay that debt off is if they impose more taxes. They're taxing the people in Great Britain, but now they recognize an opportunity to tax the colonists because technically the colonists are still under British control. They're still British subjects, is what you would call them. So what they passed is something called the Proclamation Line of 1763. So again, the Proclamation Line, so they're like proclaiming something, okay? They're declaring that this line is there and you're not allowed to cross the line, okay? Imaginary line, you can't cross it, okay? Yes, that's like my proclamation line over there. You're not allowed to cross my line, okay? Unless you have permission, which the colonists did not have permission. 0 permission given, okay? So the Proclamation Line of 1763 is this red line here on this map, okay? And essentially what that is outlining is like the eastern border of the Appalachian Mountains. Everybody with me? So on the eastern side of the mountains are your British colonies. On the western side, still controlled by the British, but a lot of Native Americans lived there. Okay, so this line was created for 2 reasons. 1, the British have to pay off debt. How are they going to pay off the debt? Taxes, right? And who are you going to tax? The colonists. What if all the colonists leave the colonies? Then you can't tax anybody, right? And so this line there, basically, it was kind of like a, hey, we're not like really putting you in jail, but we're kind of putting you in jail. Like you're not allowed to leave because we said so, because we need to tax you and we need to make money, okay? The second reason they pass it is so that if all the colonists leave, then it might cause war with the Native Americans in this area. Does that make sense? So really what they told the colonists is like, hey, you're not allowed to leave because I know we gained all this land, but we don't want to make the natives mad. And then like under their breath, they're like, but we can't wait to tax you. Right? So if you're a colonist, how are you going to feel about this line?
It's not existing.
Yeah, essentially the colonists go, yeah, right. Cool story, bro. Next, right? And so the colonists, there's not like there's a wall, there's not like there's a fence, there's not like there's soldiers patrolling this imaginary line. And so colonists definitely leave. They're like, yeah, right. We do what we want. All right, questions there? Again, William Pitt didn't help by lying, saying that the colonists wouldn't have to pay for the war. And this proclamation line, it's like if someone tells you, you can't do this, what are you going to do? You're going to do it, right? So the colonists are like, I can't what? I can't leave? Okay, bye. See ya, right?